I'm Damon Fairless. That's Javier Milei with a chainsaw, surrounded by supporters, and they are stoked. The Chainsaw Man, as he's known, is also known as El Loco and the Donald Trump of Argentina. He's a controversial economist and a former media pundit with a collection of cloned dogs. He's a self-described libertarian with radical far-right views, and he's soon to be Argentina's next president.
A todos los argentinos de bien, porque hoy comienza la reconstrucción de Argentina.
The chainsaw, a symbol of how he plans to carve up Argentina's government and its economy in the middle of its worst economic crisis in decades.
Today, we're asking how this political outsider rode to victory on promises of extreme government cuts, privatization of state companies, and the end of Argentina's central bank and its currency. Natalie Alcoba is a freelance journalist based in Buenos Aires, and she's here with me now to talk about it. Hey, Natalie, it's great to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thank you.
I've been reading about Javier Milei for a couple months now in the lead up to this election, and I mean, he's a lot. I guess I want to start this off by trying to get a better understanding of who he is. So we know he's a self-professed libertarian. He's a political outsider. He's defeated the ruling party candidate to win. But beyond that, can you kind of give me a sense of what he's about? What's he known for?
I mean, he came on the scene a few years ago, essentially as like a political pundit. He's an economist who, was given a lot of space on some of the big primetime television shows, and became known for his unvarnished attacks on government policies. Really outlandish statements. At that time, he was quite critical of policies of the right-wing government of Mauricio Macri. And then there's the aspects of him that are just kind of like, stuff that you kind of can't make up, right? Like that, he's got this history, and he's talked on television about having been a tantric sex coach.
¿Y el sexo tántrico seguís por ahí? Porque te escuché una vez que hablaba del sexo. ¿Practicás?
Sí, claro, fui profesor.
He led like a Rolling Stones cover band. He has 5 beloved dogs that are his family and that are clones.
5 clone dogs, describing them as his best strategists. He was elected.
He'll have these incredible episodes on television where he'll take to like smashing a piñata of the central bank live. Like he's just prone to these like larger than life, wild, scenes that, kind of just keep feeding the media in Argentina and have created all this incredible fodder that has been building for years, really. But then during the campaign trail, we've seen it all kind of come back to the fore.
He's got these nicknames, right? El Loco and the Wig and.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and there's this look he has this look about him, right? Like this disheveled hair that, yes, earned him the nickname the Wig. He's often like wearing like a black leather jacket. In fact, actually, he's got these like thick sideburns, and one of the person who kind of like dealt with his image at one point in his campaign says that he was made to look like the Wolverine comic character.
I think I got to say the thing that really stands out about him are his dogs, and as you mentioned, they're clones, but they're also named after right-leaning economists, including Friedman, and he's also got one named Conan, right?
Yeah, exactly. Conan is like the prized possession, and Conan is a clone of his original Conan. Their English Mastiff dogs are huge, and so he calls Conan his child. And then the other 4 dogs, which are also clones of the original, are his grandchildren. Yes, named for conservative economists.
So there are videos of Milei dressed up in a superhero costume performing as an alter ego he calls General ANCAP, which is anarcho-capitalist. And so that's him singing about Argentina overspending and then going to the central bank for more money. So I've been hearing a lot about this ideology, ANCAP ideology, libertarianism. Can you describe Milei's ideology for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think essentially he believes that the government should be intervening in the lives of its citizens as little as possible. I mean, he even today, I mean, it's stuff that he's been reaffirming on the campaign trail, but today again, was like, we're going to privatize everything
Mhm.
that we can. He believes in the rights of the individual and the rights of private property, and that the free market should reign, and the problems of society will be solved by market forces. Now, in terms of what that also means, practically speaking, I mean, he's given notice, and he talked about this in his campaign. In his intention is to cut public spending by 15%. He
Right.
wants to privatize, state companies, both the large energy company, public radio, public television, scientific bodies. He's talked about changing the way public healthcare and public education works, although he has since softened that a bit. But this is the direction that he's going for, and he's been very clear about that.
One of the big things he ran on, right, was in addition to privatizing all the stuff you mentioned, but totally scrapping the central bank, bringing in the U.S. dollar as the national currency, getting rid of the peso. And I guess beyond the kind of financial ideologies he brings, what are his social policies like? His thoughts on social issues?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's no question that the economic policies are the ones that have dominated the campaign trail and that really have attracted most people. But he's gone into a lot of other social spheres. So, in particular, talking about in Argentina a couple of years ago, legalized elective abortion. It was a
Mhm.
trailblazer in the region on that front, and he personally is against legal abortion and has talked about how he would want to put that to a referendum in order to reverse that. How that would happen, it's not entirely clear. It was not something that was in his campaign, in his platform, but people that will be part of his government are already talking about how they want to make that a priority. So that's a real thing. He's talked about was in his platform, loosening gun laws. On climate change, he doesn't believe that humans are to blame for climate change. On education and healthcare, again, he kind of reinforces this idea that these are services that have a particular value and someone is paying for them. In education, in particular, his main idea was to switch public education to a voucher-based system so that people had the freedom to pick where it was that they were going to school. They would get their education. I mean, of course, in Argentina as well, there are publicly funded universities. So the university is free, and that's another target of his.
So Natalie, that's Milei in a nutshell. But let's take a step back and talk about what's been happening in Argentina that kind of set the stage for his presidency. What do people need to know about the state of the economy right now?
Yes, it has been a very difficult few years. Boom and bust cycles, kind of defined by that over the last few decades.
Mhm.
But I'd say this is one of the worst ones, and it's marked in particular by an alarmingly high rate of inflation.
An economic crisis worsening by the day. Argentina becoming unaffordable for essentially its whole population.
There's no one reason for all of this, but a major problem is that Argentina's government spends more money than it has.
This creates deficits.
Annual inflation here is clocking over 140%, which is
Mhm.
the third worst in the world after Venezuela and after Lebanon. mean, it's not just the number, but also the speed at which inflation changes. At the start of 2020, around the pandemic, inflation was around 40%. Like I said, now it's at 140%. There are particular moments of political or economic volatility that send it just kind of spiking. And you'll have these weeks where you can really feel that. Merchants, don't know what price to put on certain things. They won't sell you it until things stabilize. It's obviously like a topic that dominates all sorts of conversation in the media. Alongside that, poverty's been extremely high for a long time. It's around 40%.
Yeah.
And also the value of its peso has crumbled. I mean, it's a very disorienting condition to live under.
So along with these economic problems you've been talking about, there's also this growing frustration with the political system there. And, we can't get into everything, obviously, but can you just give me a sense of what do we need to understand from a historical context here?
Yes, it is. It's good that we're not getting into all of it. I mean, ultimately, like Argentina is a deeply politically polarized country that has lived through, devastating periods of military rule where human rights were eviscerated and, the economy deregulated.
A life sentence for 85-year-old Jorge Rafael Videla. The former dictator oversaw the bloodiest years of Argentina's infamous dirty war against suspected left-wing activists. A just war against subversion, he says, in which as many as 30,000 Argentines were detained, tortured, and disappeared.
These last 40 years of democracy have been marked by strong swings, both political swings and economic swings. I mean, there's this movement in Argentina called Peronismo that's named for a former president, General Juan Domingo Perón.
Peronism was born in the mid-1940s with the rise to prominence of the then Employment Secretary Juan Domingo Perón. He went on to become president 3 times, backed by his charismatic second wife, Evita. They've both been dead for a long time, but the movement that bears their name lives on.
He built this movement largely around ideas around the working class, but it's also a shape-shifting political force. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's left wing. I mean, its fingerprints are all over, Argentina in the last few decades. The country has also, lived through hyperinflation in the 1980s. In the 1990s, it was this neoliberal decade of, again, privatization. A lot of echoes to what we're seeing right now, the government trying to deal with that astronomical inflation by pegging the local currency to the dollar, which again is something similar to what Milei is talking about. But that project ended in ruin. The banking system collapsed. People lost their life savings. The government defaulted on international debt. All trust in the financial system obliterated, which of course feeds into the government's ability to also collect taxes because people don't trust the system or their leaders. There have been, since that last crash of 2001, there have been moments of recovery, and some of that was helped by a global commodities boom, and it also brought more protectionist policies and the government, a more left-wing government, expanded the welfare state that helped a lot of poor people, raised their quality of life. But those conditions really didn't last.
Right.
And it's been this deterioration over the last 10, 12 years. A right-wing government in the middle of that took out massive amounts of debt that put another stranglehold on what it was that the government could do. And so inflation was climbing, and then the pandemic hits, which of course, worsened everything. But all of this is just mostly to highlight that it's been this exhausting roller coaster ride for Argentines, and who, are constantly kind of feeling like they're in this perpetual, short-lived moments of calm and then crisis again. And so all of that kind of sets the stage for what's happened now.
Right. So, and it sounds like that's led to this appetite for something different, and which is precisely what Milei has, that's how he's positioned himself, right? As this outsider, as this anti-establishment guy. But I'm curious, who's his base? Who does he appeal to the most there?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most important things about Milei is that he appeals to a cross section of people. I mean, we talk a lot, and a lot of attention has been paid to the youth that have turned to him, and that's absolutely true. A lot of young people who became kind of having discovered these TikTok videos, these clips of this guy who was like railing against like a system that they also thought isn't working.
Ministerio de Cultura, afuera. Ministerio de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible.
Then they in turn have become kind of like evangelists for these ideas and have gone about and convinced their family, their friends to vote for him as well. But he appeals beyond just young people. He appeals to people in the conservative establishment, to right wingers. He appeals to people who have more money, those who come from who are in poorer parts of the country, who again haven't seen their lives, their lot in life really changed. Individuals who traditionally voted for the left, and you'll often come across people tell you that it's not really about his ideas. It's that he's a different face, a different voice, and he's really tapped into this notion that Argentines keep electing the same cast of characters, and that's why we're in this mess.
I support Javier Milei because I need a change. I want a change for my country that I deeply love, and we've been suffering many years of decadence.
I think this time Argentina needed a change, and that's why I bet on this new proposal. We are doing really bad as a country, and I hope Milei does not disappoint us.
Of course, that message that doesn't stand up under scrutiny because he's now since aligned himself with members of that same establishment. But he was successful in delivering that message that like the political caste, as he often talks about them, is to blame for all of our problems.
Okay, so I'm curious because you're in Buenos Aires, once the news broke that he beat his opponent by nearly 3 million votes, I guess, what was the reaction on the streets? Like, what would you see on election day?
Yeah, I was actually in his headquarters in a hotel in downtown Buenos Aires, and crowds of people like gathered outside of the hotel. As soon as the polls closed, even though there would be several more hours before the results came in. I mean, people, you'll find people coming in from in some cases from other provinces, a few hours away, wanting to try to get a glimpse of him. So you had that scene outside, and then inside, his soldiers, a lot of young libertarians. And, one of his top officials came out and talked about how, one of the themes in the prelude to the election was Milei really raising the concern about the possibility that there would be election fraud, which is another similarity to, of course, Donald Trump. And this official came out and said there had been no issue for the results. And so I think that also kind of reinforced this idea that the results must be looking good.
For Argentina, this was a political earthquake. Javier Milei won by a wider than expected margin, and his victory sent a clear message. Argentinians wanted change.
And once they became official, it was just utter jubilation inside, outside. Argentina also has this strong tradition of demonstration, of bongos in the street. And so there was a flavor of that outside of the hotel, lots of people with flags, chanting, calling out his slogans, just euphoria, really.
Milei's politics are obviously pretty polarizing, and he's made a lot of folks in Argentina angry. So can you give me a sense of who his biggest detractors are?
Right. I mean, although he earned 55% of the vote, 45% did not vote for him. And so that side is truly devastated. A great deal of concern in terms of the impact that this will have on poorer sectors of society, on civil liberties, on human rights. Some of his loudest detractors are human rights groups, feminist organizations, big blocs on the left. There were intellectuals and scientists and economists who also came out during the campaign, raising concerns about the feasibility of some of his policies, what the potential consequences would be. I mean, we're now kind of waiting to see who he puts in particular positions and what that might signal about their approach with certain sectors. But there's a lot of fear as well on the street about the implications of his victory.
I personally didn't vote for him because I felt like it was a leap into the void. God willing, he surprises us.
One of the things he said leading up to the election is that he would be willing to arrest people who protested against him or opposed him vocally. Are people worried about that now?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, given the economic conditions, he talked today about how the next 6 months are going to be incredibly hard. I mean, he's full steam ahead with cutting 15% from the budget. So what the response to that will be? I mean, as I said before, Argentina does have a culture of going out to demonstrate, to march. The street is a way of being seen and is a political tool for a lot of sectors and is a right. But how he responds to that, a lot of people are worried about that.
He's also upset the sizable Catholic population there too, right?
Yes, he's attacked Pope Francis, who is the most famous Argentine at the moment, calling him like a representative of evil on earth, a filthy leftist.
But the Pope, you believe the Pope has an affinity for Raúl Castro?
Sí, exacto. Sí, tiene afinidad por los comunistas asesinos.
But now he's the president, right? So he received a call from the Pope yesterday, and there needs to be some kind of diplomatic dealings between these heads of state. So we'll see how that actually plays out.
He's also notably downplayed the crimes of the military dictatorship that was responsible for killing thousands of Argentines in the 70s and 80s, right?
And that's right. And that's a particular aspect that has human rights groups very concerned, in particular for the way in which it can give license to hateful discourse. I mean, he has minimized the atrocities of the military dictatorship, the last dictatorship between 1976 and 83. He questions the estimated number of people who disappeared and were murdered by the dictatorship, and says it was far fewer. Argentina has worked hard and is renowned around the world in terms of how it has tried to deal with that past and bring perpetrators of that violence to justice. And so there is concern around how that, if that work will continue, how that will change.
Let's talk about what this means for Argentina going forward. Back to his promises to slash the government and dollarize the economy, eliminate the central bank. So those are big campaign promises, but he still has to work in the legislature, which is really dominated by the center left and center right. So is there a sense that these big economic election promises are actually doable? Does he have the power to do that?
This is the big question right now. I mean, there's no question that, the mandate that he was given and the office that he occupies now gives him a great deal of power. But yes, you're right. His party occupies a small fraction of the seats in the upper and lower house. His party, La Libertad Avanza, Freedom Advances, which got about 10% of the seats in the upper house, 15% in the lower house. That means he has to form coalitions in order to get a lot of his proposals through. I mean, Congress ultimately would be approving budgets. He's already aligned himself with certain conservative sectors. He received the backing of former right-wing President Mauricio Macri and the candidate that he had put forward. And it's in fact due to that alliance. It's that alliance that allowed him, of course, to win ultimately. So he has, certain sectors of the conservative coalition, but not all of them, right? So he doesn't have a majority right now, even with the conservatives. So he will have to appeal or have the support of more moderate parts of conservative, to say nothing of whether or not he'd be able to appeal to parts of Peronismo, which is largely center left. So we don't know. But there are things that he can do. Plans of privatization can be accomplished, without going through Congress. So it's an open question.
So leaders on the far right around the world took notice of this. He got a lot of congratulations. People like Donald Trump in the U.S. and Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil have celebrated him, embraced him, congratulated him. Is there a sense, Natalie, of where this political shift is taking Argentina?
I mean, the reality is that this can be a dramatic U-turn for Argentina. He is intending to change, a lot of the ways in which the institutions, the government have functioned. Argentina is known for a lot of its progressive policies. These kinds of shifts kind of strike at the heart of how Argentines see themselves. But there's also no denying that a lot of Argentines think that it just hasn't worked, that it isn't working, and that perhaps what the government needs is a radical shakeup. It's just, at what cost?
All right, Natalie, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, that's all for today. I'm Damon Fairless. Thanks for listening to Front Burner, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.